Is my mic on? It's live? Yes. Great. I did once give a lecture in a room similar to this, and it did not go well. Nobody laughed at my jokes, and it was terrible. So I thought, okay, well, maybe they can't hear me. So I asked, can you hear me in the back? And then there was actually somebody in the back row that said, no, we can't hear you up here. But then there was somebody in the first row that said, okay, I'd like to change seats then. It's a true story. So Rebecca just told me another anecdote that when she got her first job after finishing university, she was responsible for getting a cake for Europe Day. And she gave the order to a baker, and apparently he didn't really know what the flag looked like, so he Googled it. And there's must have been something wrong with the colors because it came back green. And in a way, that's a perfect anecdote to introduce my speech here to you today, because I will actually argue that maybe the flag should be green. That maybe our common European symbol should be green. Because for many of the challenges that we are facing, and they are many, the answers are all about going through a just green transition of our societies. But anyway, 75 years ago, in the wake of a terrible world war, millions and millions killed, the cities of Europe in ruins, visionary people decided. And on this day, the 9th of June, Robert Schuman being one of them, decided that this would no longer stand. That instead of fighting each other, we should work together. That instead of being divided, we should become one. Now, at that time, obviously, the idea to have a coal and steel union, it seemed almost impossible. How could countries, especially the two big ones in the middle of Europe, Germany and France, how could they become so intertwined that we knew for certain that they would never fight again? But the whole idea, presented by Schuman 75 years ago today, was to make a union of something that both countries needed: coal and steel. Coal. Why coal? Because of energy. So basically, the whole foundation of the European Union that we know today is about energy. Now, since then, obviously, divisions have materialized. What was once just an idea, and for many probably also a pretty unrealistic, albeit beautiful vision, is today reality. 27 countries, almost 500 million people work together, making rules about everything in our everyday life, from which chemicals are allowed in your toothpaste that you use in the morning, to rules for how many dangerous particles can be in the air when you take your bike to work, to what are the rules on the labor markets that make sure that we have a level playing field when competing to each other, and make sure that the rights of our workers are supported and protected, to fighting climate change, and so on and so forth. Almost 80,000 pages of legislation in the EU's acquis communautaire. It's actually quite incredible when you think about it. 27 countries has chosen to work together, knowing very well that when you say yes to that, you also give away some sovereignty. You give away your own ability to decide precisely what to do, when to do it. Now, it has happened probably for many reasons. Many decision makers have made decisions over the years that was based in different interests and different reasonings. But first and foremost, this is a project of peace. It's a project of being tied together. And it's a project where when we work together, are able to solve problems and address challenges that no country would be able to face alone. So the area that I work with every day, energy policy, is quite illustrative to that. And I want to take you into my office, bring you into the discussions that I'm a part of every day and the deliberations that we are doing in order to face some of the big challenges that are in front of us right now. But before I get to that, I want to just say a few words about the extremely serious situation that we are in. One, we have war on our continent. Russia has attacked Ukraine, a good friend of the European Union, a candidate country. Tens of thousands of people have been killed, millions have been injured in an illegal war. This is obviously a threat to all of us. This means that we need to work together not only on helping our friends in Ukraine, obviously we do, but also on protecting ourselves. Because we risk being next. Who is to say that Putin will stop in Ukraine? That risk has not become smaller since President Trump has taken office in the US. Because every time an American president questions the solidarity that we have in NATO, obviously that can also, in a worst case scenario, lead Putin to think that we are no longer allied in NATO, that we no longer have each other's back, that we no longer stand shoulder by shoulder. This is, in my view, the most serious situation that we've been in since the Second World War. And this is also why security is our number one priorities in these months and years. We need to stand together, shoulder by shoulder, to protect ourselves, but also to help Ukraine fight the war against Russia, because it is also indirectly our war. Okay, energy. I was Minister of Climate, Energy and Public Utilities in Denmark when the full-scale war broke out in 22. And the first couple of weeks, we spent day and night in the ministry making emergency plans. What would we do if Putin turned off the taps? If he closed for our energy in Europe? The gas that we got from him, 45% of all of the gas in Europe came from Russia. What would we do? Well, in Denmark, we had a whole list of companies that we would have to force to close down in order to have enough gas so that people could heat their homes and hospitals could keep running and so forth. Imagine that. We had a list of companies that we would force to close down. And if they did not want to do it, we would send people in uniform to make sure that it happened. This is very, very serious, obviously. And Denmark wasn't even as exposed as many other countries in Europe. So had he done that, had Putin closed from one day to the next, weaponized energy as he's done later, then Europe would have been thrown into a recession. And that is obviously a very, very important lesson to draw from this. We can no longer be dependent on an aggressor like Putin. For our own security, for our own prosperity, we cannot be in the pocket of a man who doesn't hesitate to blackmail countries, who doesn't hesitate to weaponize energy. So for that reason alone, we need to be independent of Russian fuel in the future. But also for a second reason. This month, as last month, as the month before that, EU member states imported fossil fuel from Russia for 1.8 billion euros per month. When it was at its highest, it was 12 billion euros per month. So since 22, we've actually spent more money buying fuel and energy from Russia than we've given in aid to Ukraine. So we've given more money to our enemy than we've given to our friend that we're trying to protect. The numbers are so huge, it's a little bit difficult to comprehend, so I've calculated an example that might make it easier. The amount that we've used buying especially gas energy as a whole from Russia since February 22 equals the cost price of 2,400 new F-35 fighter jets. Imagine that. But last week we sent a very clear message to Putin and Russia. No more. No more will we accept and tolerate our member states being blackmailed. No more will we allow you to weaponize energy against us. No more will we keep helping to fill up your war chest in Kremlin. We are now banning import of gas from Russia. And we are asking countries to phase out the dependency that they have in other energy sources like enriched uranium. This is a big step. The EU has never done something like this against another country before, but it is, in my opinion, long overdue. I will say, however, that this is a complex thing to do. And we've come far. In February 22, we got more than half of the coal that we use in Europe from Russia. Today, we get no coal. We got 27% of our oil from Russia. Today, we get 3%. We got 45% of our gas. Today, we get 13%. So on one hand, we've made a transition that has been quite significant, and I don't know of any other region in the world that could do the same, which is of course a success, and it shows that we can stand together when it's needed. But on the other hand, we're not where we need to be yet, and it's taken too long, and the result has been us paying far more to Putin than we should. So, for me, number one task every morning when I get to my office, how can we get rid of that dependency? Number two, so you know when Trump assumed office in the US, he had to swear on the Bible, right? Well, when I became commissioner, I had to swear on the Draghi report. I'm kidding, but I'm also not really kidding, because the Draghi report really is, if not the Bible, then definitely a manual of what we need to do in Europe to increase our competitiveness. And we are under pressure. And if our competitiveness does not improve, it will hurt our prosperity. Draghi mentions energy more than 700 times because we pay 2 to 3 times more for our energy in Europe than they do, for instance, in the US or China. So the prices need to go down. Third big challenge, climate change. So last year was the hottest year ever recorded. The year before that also broke that record, and the year before that also broke that record, and I'm assuming that this year will probably break it again. Climate change is not something that might happen in the future. Climate change is here now. Already now, do we see very serious and severe consequences? Already now are people dying. This is before climate change is out of control. Imagine when the temperatures increase to over 1.5 or even over 2 degrees, then self-enhancing effects will set in and the consequences will be much, much worse. Floodings, droughts, extreme weather, storms, hurricanes. This is probably the biggest challenge that we face as a humanity, that the planet faces. And compared to the other crises that we have, this is the one that we will have to face probably forever. So hopefully we will have war in Ukraine. Hopefully we will manage to deter Russia so that it stops there. Hopefully the strained relationship that we have right now with the US administration will normalize and the trade war will stop. All of these things I'm pretty confident will happen. But climate change, that fight is not one that we can just win by making some political decisions. For us now, it's about limiting the negative effects of climate change. For us now, it's about making sure that we do not reach that point of no return where the self-enhancing effects sets in, where the boundaries of our planetary system, of our planet's biosystem are broken. This is such a serious threat that we have a moral imperative to fight climate change. Now, this is not a task that has become smaller. On the contrary, not only are we seeing the effects growing every year, we are unfortunately also seeing some countries stepping back from the fight against climate change. So the new American administration are pulling the US out of the Paris Agreement. They are stopping renewable energy projects. They're moving in the wrong direction instead of moving forward. We as a union need to do the opposite. When others step back, we need to step forward. When others backtrack, we need to fast track. And that is indeed what we're doing. And the really good news is the things we need to do to become independent of the gas from Putin, the things we need to do to deliver on the Draghi report to become more energy efficient, have more renewables, and thereby cheaper energy to become more competitive. They are exactly the same things that we need to do to fight climate change. And that's why, although I do love the blue flag, maybe it should actually be green. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you for that wonderful speech that took us all the way back to Schumann and then into the future of climate change, or should we say present. This is the transition. So I'm the one standing between you, asking questions to Dan, and us clapping of all of us. But I thought, given that we have you here, which is a unique opportunity, we'd start with something a little bit personal, or just what does a commissioner do? Because one of the things you mentioned, you've been a minister, you've been a member of the European Parliament, and we've known each other quite a long time because apart from all your other things, you like to write books, which is not that common. It is among social democrats in Denmark, it has become quite common. But you write books. One of them was called Europavisioner, and you asked different scholars to contribute, which of course, as a professor of political science, I'm glad that politicians appreciate research and education, and I think you're one of those big supporters. So thank you for that. But the question I had when preparing for this was also, you've tried many different things. What has been the biggest surprise for you coming to Brussels and taking on the job as a commissioner? What has surprised you the most about this job?
That's a great question. So I will say, I'm not sure that I will say I was surprised, because I sort of suspected that might be the way things were. But nonetheless, the biggest difference between being a minister in a government and being a commissioner is actually a positive one, I will say. Because as a minister, you spend hours every day just doing damage control. Just dealing with whatever stories in the media that day. Dealing with questions from parliamentarians that some of them are legitimate questions where they are in fact just using their democratic mandate to try and solve a problem. But a lot of them is also about trying to get the minister in trouble. So the combination of the media and this parliamentary way of working really is exhausting and takes up too much of the resources, both of the minister but also of the civil servants and the people trying to help run the country. Where in Brussels, I do accept the argument that it's bad that there's not more media attention on what we do in Brussels for democratic reasons. I do accept that, but I will also have to say that it does have some advantages.
In Brussels, no one can
It has
hear you
one
scream.
advantage, for instance. One advantage is that you can actually listen to arguments. So just a test, can you give me one example ever of a politician that has gone into a room and said, well, I believe so, and then 20 minutes after coming out saying, it turns out I was pretty stupid. I didn't read the report properly, or I didn't understand the arguments. My colleague just persuaded me. That's never happened, of course. You could have maybe also framed it in a different way, but that, of course, doesn't happen. So the way the media logic is that you cannot really change your mind. If you change your mind, then that is the story. That's just one example, but it's an illustrative example of the dynamics of politics and conflicts and competition in politics and the media that we don't have to the same extent in Brussels. So this means that when I go to the Parliament, the European Parliament, the questions that I get are tougher because the people that work in the European Parliament are all experts on their own fields. So they're really knowledgeable, and it's not an easy thing for me to go to the ITRA committee, for instance. But I still enjoy it because it's a real discussion. And sometimes I will actually be educated by the members of Parliament. Whereas if the same happened in Denmark, it'll be front page, and it'll be the minister is losing this debate, or can he or her even continue as a minister, all of these things. So that's actually a positive difference. Then the other side of that coin is, of course, just how little attention is given to very, very important things that we do every day. Maybe I should worry more about it, because obviously it is a democratic problem. But I've just sort of come to accept that is the way it is. If you think about, let's say, for instance, this Tuesday when we presented the plan on banning Russian gas, it did get covered, but I also spoke to friends that didn't see it. Yeah. And if you think about how many minutes of TV has been shown on the conflict in Ukraine, and this being probably one of the most, or certainly one of the most important historic decisions that we made, and it's not really covered. It is a problem.
This plan that you talk about, maybe we can have a question just to kickstart the debate also with the students and everyone in the auditorium. So, I mean, as far as I could read, the plan was actually ready before, and then it was kind of delayed and stalled. And could you lift the hood off a bit to the degree that you can share
Sure.
in this not really Chatham House? What happened?
Yeah, so I was tasked with presenting the plan within 100 days.
Yeah.
So we had scheduled it, but we had to postpone because, one, it's difficult, it's complex. We are using new legislative tools that we haven't used before. So just very briefly, normally we would approach these questions with sanctions. But since it will be impossible to get unanimity, which sanctions demand, then we couldn't do that. That's also the honest explanation of why this hasn't happened before. So we really had to think out of the box, and what we then came up with was a pretty complicated legal solution, but which makes it possible for us to ban the gas. So we will ban first the spot market deals, means that 1/3 of the gas Russian gas will disappear from 1st of January, and then a little bit longer it'll take to ban the long contracts. And as I said, we've never done that before, so we had to be 100% sure that we also had the legal details right, because obviously we are exposing European companies that has very, very big, very long-term contracts.
And you have a Hungarian commissioner, not exactly in your field.
Yes.
But who did manage to put a break or two. There were also rumors that it was all about waiting for Trump, if this could be used somehow, our dependency also on US.
No, I mean, for me, I would say, irrespectively of what goes on in the peace negotiations, and even if we have a peace solution soon, which we all hope, for me, I think it would be extremely unwise of us to open for Russian gas again. It would be repeating the mistake that we did before the war, making ourselves dependent of a regime that we cannot trust, whilst at the same time helping fill Putin's war chest so that he can turn against another country. So I'm extremely happy that we will now make this legislation, also because contrary to sanctions that needs to be renewed and that are tied to the concrete war situation, this is not. So we will not open Nord Stream or any other ideas that I've seen floating around again, if there's a peace.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Dan. This is, we could talk for a whole day about the plan, but I also know that we have to end by 1, and there might be a few questions from students or anyone else in the auditorium. And I think my role is basically to see who is out there. So if you could just put your hand up. Any questions are possible, and we'll send out a mic. We might collect a few questions. Yes? Please go ahead. And if you can say your name or if you're a student or what you do, it's helpful.
Yes, of course. My name is Victoria, and I'm a student at the University of Copenhagen. I'm studying political science, and then I'm also active in the Green Youth movement. And my question to you is that banning Russian gas, you said that yourself, the EU has never done anything like this before. And for me, it seems like a perfect opportunity to do something massively different. But you also said that the EU has like a moral imperative to act on climate change. And right now it seems like we're going to replace the import of gas with the liquefied natural gas from the US. So how will you make sure that we're not just replacing one deeply unsustainable dependency with another deeply unsustainable dependency, not from the US? And secondly, going back to what I said in the beginning, this is a massive opportunity to do something different. And we know that renewable energy is only getting cheaper, so why aren't you investing massively in electrifying the European grids and investing massively in renewable infrastructure? Thank you.
That's a great question, because you're speaking into what is, of course, the overall strategy. So even if there had been no conflict with Russia, even if there had been no war in Ukraine, still we would need to turn away from fossils. Now, I agree with you that the fight against climate change is the main reason for that. But there's only four. You're probably not a social democrat, I don't know, but there's only four social democrats. There's only four social democrats in the commission, and there's nobody to the left of that. I'm just assuming that you are, you might not be, I don't know, and it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. But I'm just saying there's 4 out of 27 that has that approach. The European Parliament, there's a clear majority of parties being elected on the message we need to backtrack on the green transition, and in the Council the majority is even bigger for that stand. So any logic would lead to the conclusion that that would of course then also mean backtracking on the green transition in the EU, and you are political science students, many of you, you would have a hard time arguing in a thesis that it would be feasible to do the things that you suggest, fast expanding renewables and so forth. Nonetheless, that is actually what is happening. Last year we broke all records with new deployed renewable energy, 78 gigawatts of renewables. This year it'll be 89, the year after even more. We're spending billions on investing in grid infrastructure. Not enough, I agree with you, we need to do even more. But it is going fast in the right direction. Why? Because climate change is no longer the only reason why we should do it. For me, it will be enough of a reason. But for many, not. And for the majority in Europe of our populations, unfortunately, the election showed, not so much. So in that sense, even though I would have preferred, obviously, that we were not in a very serious conflict, trade conflict with US and more potential military conflict with Russia, it would have been fantastic not to have those two conflicts. But the fact that we do means that nobody argues against me in the Commission, in the Parliament, or in the Council. Almost nobody. When I argue for exactly these things. More renewables, fast. More energy efficiency, fast. More physical infrastructure, basically cables in the ground, to make sure that we can become better connected and electrify our industry and the heating of our homes and so forth. Fast. And you will see even more of this in the future.
But what about the US? I think you didn't fully respond to the question of whether in the short term we just replace one dependency with another one.
Yeah, great question. Yeah, no, so the best case would also be if we could become independent of gas as such in the short term. And to some extent we have reduced our gas consumption significantly over the last years as a result of what happened in Ukraine, and we will continue to do so. So primarily because of electrification and the deployment of new renewables, we reduce our use of gas with around 15 BCM, which is the measure you use for gas per year. Now that's approximately just under half of how much gas we get from Russia right now. So half of the gas that we will cut away from Russia, already in 1 year, we will replace not with gas from other parts of the world, but with savings, with energy efficiency of renewable energy. But overall, obviously, we still use too much gas in Europe. And last year we imported fossils for more than 400 billion euros. This is obviously unsustainable both for our economy but even more so for our climate. So it needs to go fast. We will in the Union not step back, but on the contrary we will have an even more ambitious approach going towards the 2040 target, where we will reduce our emissions by 90%. Again, it's actually not that easy of an argument to win in the political climate that we have now in Europe and with the governments that we have now in Europe. But the reason why it is possible and the reason why I believe that we will stick to the 90% is exactly because this is also about competitiveness and security.
Okay. Are there other questions or? Yeah.
Hi Dan, my name is Christopher. I'm a part of the Danish People's Party's youth, and I study political science here at the University of Copenhagen. I wanted to ask you about the renewable energy umbrella, if you regard nuclear energy as a part of that, and if you don't, how do you expect to solve the problems regarding that the sun is not always shining and the wind not always blowing in regards to renewable energy?
So are there any non-Danes here? Foreigners? Only one? Yeah, all of you guys, but you're almost Danish. All of the ambassadors here, they are. But only one or two students. I just want to tell you something that's probably not that common in Europe. Because your party chairman, Morten Messerschmidt, is actually one of my personal friends. When I tell this to... Usually I actually don't tell it to anybody. No, but when I do, I tell this to colleagues. In most European countries, if you were that divided politically, you couldn't even be in a room together. And I think that's something we can be proud of in Denmark, that we are able to work together across political divides. Anyway, so great question. When you say nuclear umbrella, I'm a little bit confused. Do you mean, for security reasons, nuclear bombs, or do you mean energy?
The renewable energy umbrella.
Yes, okay. Sure, it's not to be polemic, it's just that umbrella is often used for the security part of it, but yes. So right now we have nuclear production in 11 countries in Europe, 99 gigawatts of electricity produced every year. If we look at the projections, it will go down the next 10 years to around 88 gigawatts in the mid-40s, and then it'll go up again to around 100 gigawatts close to 2050. So more or less the same as we have now, but of course in a completely different energy mix with a hopefully much more electrified Europe that is built primarily on renewables. So yes, nuclear will be a part of the energy mix. I personally have always argued quite fiercely against nuclear, especially in a country like Denmark. And I will also continue to argue that had more people been of the conviction that I was of 20 years or 30 years ago, then we could have actually lived without nuclear energy in Europe now, because we could have been so much further in the deployment of renewables. But since we did not do that, we are now in a situation where we cannot reach our clean energy targets. So by clean, I thereby mean not emitting carbon before 2030 and 40 without nuclear. By the way, that's shared by the IPCC that says there's no scenario under which we stay under 2 degrees temperature increase where nuclear is also a part of that. So my own view is pragmatic. We need it, but we need to then do it in a way that is as safe as possible and where we take care of the waste in a way that is as safe as possible. I still am baffled that some countries that don't have nuclear consider that a solution, especially in the short term, but even in the longer term, because nuclear can be fine if you have a lot of time and a lot of money. Because it takes you 15 years from you decide until you have a nuclear plant, if you're lucky. So it will not solve your problems tomorrow or even in 10 years, maybe in 15 years. But it's expensive. So if you don't have other possibilities, by all means, look into it. But if you ask Denmark, one of the countries in the world with the biggest potential for renewables, then go that way. Much cheaper, much faster, much more flexible, no danger with regards to the security concerns that are still there, of course, even though they're getting smaller and smaller, fortunately, with nuclear power. So for all of those reasons. So the question about the baseload. So in Denmark, baseload is often considered a problem with renewables because most countries have.
Can you explain baseload?
Yeah. So okay, baseload. What is the base load of the energy that you get? The primary source that's always just running, like a nuclear power plant or a coal power plant, or whatever. It goes without saying that renewables fluctuate. Sometimes the sun is shining, sometimes the wind is blowing, and that's how it is in most countries, because they don't have such a big percentage of renewables. But if you have enough, like Denmark, then we turn it around and the nuclear is our baseload. And we then turn up and down the biomass, or when we used to use coal, the ones that make sure that we then have a stable supply that is also in balance with demand. Also, because we're connected. So we're connected to other countries. And that is why the European strategy needs to be much higher percentage of renewables, much better connected, so that, for instance, the nuclear we have can also be utilized in other countries where when the sun is not shining and the wind is not blowing, and then on the other way, they can get the cheap energy because that's cheaper from wind when there's a surplus of that. And then we need to combine it with more storage and all of these things, but that's a whole other lecture.
Thank you, Dan. We're running out of time. I have one final closing question, just to, if not end with the green cake, then at least, you said in the beginning that you really appreciate this kind of thorough debate and, fact-based politics, I guess. So now that you're in the commission, who's your best friend? Who's the commissioner you'd like to sit next to or have most fun with? Like maybe not Morten Messerschmidt, but getting there. And who would you rather not have a long drink with?
Well, first of all, I like my president. She's very much like the boss I had when I was a member of the government in Denmark, actually. She's a tough cookie, and she knows her stuff, and she demands a lot from us. So that I like. We also have what we call a green cluster. So that's Wopke Hoekstra, Jessica, my Swedish. Wopke is climate commission, of course. Jessica is environment, and Teresa Ribera, who is executive vice president with responsibility for the green transition. So we try and coordinate and meet us as often as we can. So it's not that I don't want to answer the question, who would I like to drink a beer with? The honest answer is actually that I haven't had time to do it yet, but there's so many of my colleagues that are extremely nice people, and all of them has a very, very, very extensive and impressive CV. I'm very eager to get to know them even better and learn about their life stories and the experiences that they have. But we do have a very good working community. It is very hectic, though. We all have our own portfolios that we're struggling to cover. We meet once a week, so usually we will meet Wednesdays. So most of us will be in Brussels or Strasbourg. Once a month it's in Strasbourg, but 3 other weeks it's in Brussels. So I would usually be there Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and we have the college meeting Wednesday, and then usually go somewhere else. So for instance, this Monday, Tuesday, it's a little bit atypical, but I'm going to Warsaw there because they have the presidency now. So we'll go to another member state or somewhere abroad, because there's a lot of traveling involved, obviously. So there's not a lot of time to hang around and drink good Belgian beer at Place Luxembourg or Grand Place, but hopefully we will get some time.
Okay, on that hopeful note,
Yes.
let's give a warm applause and thanks to Dan for coming.
Thank you. Thank you.
And thanks to International Debat for organizing. I can just say, as a professor, it's really nice to have such active students, and do sign up if you're interested. And thank you to Dan and the team, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Velkommen tilbage på studiet. Nu er du tilbage. Ja. Tak skal du have.